D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Derek and myself are in Nashville. Willie is in beautiful San Jose, California. Predators and Sharks Part 2 tonight. Puck drop at 9:30, pregame at 8:30 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Mike Borgonzi, new Titans GM, will join us at 12:30. You don't want to miss that. Titans GM Mike Borgonzi will join our program at 12:30. We'll talk to Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, at 11:30. Elliot Friedman, Sportsnet NHL insider, at 1 o'clock. A full show for all of you. Gentlemen, how are we today?
Hey, we're doing pretty good. Thursday, we've gotten over hump day. Doing well. More sports just coming in.
Do people still say hump day?
I guess.
Is that still a thing?
There's still a commercial that say hump day, ain't it? I think so. As a rerun. I mean, they recorded it years ago, but they still play it.
Willie, do you still say hump day?
It's been a while, but yeah, I haven't put it on the shelf. I haven't retired that term.
Yeah.
I think that term is still perfectly fine.
Yeah, you just dust it off every once in a while, right?
Everybody's thinking of that. What was it? The Geico commercial?
Yeah.
With the camel. Hump day! Everyone's
what I'm
thinking
saying.
of that. But
Exactly. So
I guess now I'm saying
we've gotten over hump day.
yes.
Sports is sports news is steady, filling in, and steady, coming at us like a fire hose. So, we're gonna have a good day today.
So we have obtained exclusive audio of the Chad Brinker news conference that happened before the Mike Borgonzi news conference that you aren't supposed to hear, but we have obtained exclusive audio of this news conference. David Janes, roll the tape.
What would you say you do here? Well, look, I already told you. I deal with customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Okay, that is fitting. And tell me if I'm wrong.
That was the exclusive audio
Exactly.
that you weren't supposed to hear.
But that was fitting because isn't that the same audio that we could have played when they hired Rand Carthon and they talked about how his people skills were one of the main reasons why they hired him, because he's a connector of people and all this other stuff. So, I mean, and they basically said it again. So what's any different than the last process? And I think that's what the fan base is trying to figure out. I don't think, and this has nothing to do with Borgonzi. I think it has more to do with Brinker. But you gave the fan base no reason really to think otherwise. Now, Borgonzi is going to have his own sort of stake to claim in all of this, once they start getting it going. But I think Brinker, he did himself no favor because, like I said yesterday, if you went in thinking that I'm confused, I'm not sure you walked out outside of possibly liking some things that Borgonzi said, because we had some people call in and said they enjoyed hearing some things. But in regards to Brinker, I don't think you walked out saying, oh, okay. I'm not sure if you walked out saying that. I think you were probably still in the haze in regards to him.
Well, one thing that we don't know the answer to, and we're not going to get the answer to this because we're not going to hear from Amy Adams Strunk. And Jared has asked this question, and I think it's a legitimate question. Why Chad Brinker in this position, president of football operations, supreme ruler of football? We may never get that answer. But I was looking through the transcript, Willie, of this news conference. I've called it the pseudo news conference because it wasn't streamed live. It was a from what Jared described yesterday,
Pre-game show.
Right. It was the pregame show. As Jared described it yesterday, it was a bunch of reporters in a boardroom with Chad Brinker. But the Titans sent out a transcript of the question and answer session. And I skimmed through it. It's a lot of words. But I landed on this particular passage, and this is what I want us to react to first. The question was, or it doesn't have the exact question, but it explains what the question is. On Amy Adams Strunk's reasoning for wanting Chad Brinker in this position. And this was Brinker's response, quote, I don't know if she said a reason, which is not a great start to this answer. I mean, I think she maybe over the last couple of years, maybe a better question for Burke or somebody, referring to Burke Nihil. But I mean, she understands this draft and developed system. She sees the elite franchise of the league. Like, how can we become that? Well, this is how you do it if you want to be the Steelers or the Packers or the Ravens. And that's what they do. They have their core beliefs and what they believe, and they build their team a certain way. They have their principles they live by. I've talked about this before. You've got to have a vision, process, and discipline. That's the elite franchise of this league. They have a vision. They know where they're going. How they're going to get there is the plan or the process. And then you have to have the discipline to execute that. And she's asked me to implement that for this organization. That's what we're trying to do. Did we get all of that? Because that was a word for word transcript of Chad Brinker's response to this question.
That made no damn sense.
Well, I think it was, this is again why you should have him talking.
Exactly. So that's his fault.
Where you get all the ums and I means in there, but because a lot of people talk like that. But look, I think he was there. He presented a vision. And even though it has been changed, tweaked, from the time that Ran Carthon came in, they would have you believe that his role changed, even though he was the GM for 2 years. GM year one was different than GM year two. Chad Brinker's role in year one was different than year two, and now going into year three. But I get it with the vision, and this is his chance. I guess it has been, we're going to, I'm sure, continue to analyze this. Here's the bottom line. If they start drafting good players and winning games, nobody's going to care what the structure is or anything like that. Nobody's going to care if they ever talk to Chad Brinker, if they're winning. But they just they've lost a lot of credibility because they've struggled so much. And you've got a lot of these sound bites that don't seem like everybody's on the same page. But I'm hoping Mike Barganzi comes in with a clean slate and he can start, bringing in some semblance of order here and success to where we're not worried about this stuff. We're letting them cook their recipe.
Yeah, and I think Borgazzi will be able to come in and sort of, like I said, sort of carve out his own sort of piece in this puzzle or whatnot. So I get that in regards to him, and he should. There shouldn't be backlash with Borganzi because he had nothing to do with this. He's coming in from a winning organization, and he's coming here trying to establish some of those things. Now, will he be able to establish those things? Will he truly have that authority, or is it, ultimately Chad Brinker? Again, I don't care who it is, but I think you owe the fan base explanations, not necessarily Borganzi. I think more so Brinker. He needs to explain more, and I think a little bit clearer to the fan base. That's all I'm saying. Now,
yeah, I don't think he's not very good at articulating. He had a chance yesterday to do it,
and that's why the whole
really didn't answer.
The whole 10 o'clock thing hurt him.
I think the idea is from Amy Adams's perspective, I think correctly, if she has come to the conclusion, I'm not really someone who really should be making football decisions. I want to put somebody in charge that can do this for me. Chad Brinker happened to be there in the right place at the right time. I think around the right people that are around Amy Adams, right? I think we can put that together, right? That the people around Amy Adams like Chad Brinker enough, right? They get along. Now, whether they know what they're looking for or not. And then I think Chad Brinker is good at selling. Here's what the Ravens do. Here's what the Packers do. I can especially tell you what the Packers do. Here's what the Ravens do. I can put that structure in for you. And that's how we're going to try to become like them. And I think you would add the Chiefs to that with Borganzi coming in. Is that fair? I think he sold her a vision. I think it's a very simple way of putting it. If you want to get rid of all the the pablum and all of the ups and downs and all the words. He sold her a vision, and he was around enough people that bought it, that said, "Okay, give this guy a shot, for better or worse." Even though he's got no skins on the wall or anything like that, he's not coming from a position of strength, but he has sold this vision.
Yeah, whatever vision, whether he sold it to her or the people that are closest to her, it makes it seem like, listen, if Chase, okay, Chase hired me to be a co-host with you guys. If somebody asks me or asks Chase, well, why did you hire? Well, why did you? Oh, ask me. Well, Derek, why did he put you in that space? And I say, I don't know. I can't. He didn't say a reason why he put me in there. You'll be like, well, what are you doing sitting in that seat then? If he can't at least give you a reason why he hired you, and he could have just hired you because, you were his best friend or something. But give me something. But to sit up there and say,
right.
well, I don't know why, that's like you're diminishing yourself in a sense, because you're saying I'm not worthy of the job, so I don't know why she hired me. You understand? I know you get what I'm saying, Willie. So
he hasn't been able to articulate it very well publicly to the fans, and I'm not really sure why that is. But because I thought he did a better job in the podcast last summer talking about it.
Because it was a different title. He didn't have the title that he had now. Well, at least we don't think he did.
One of the other questions asked in the pseudo news conference, this was his response to a question about the structure being in place last year and leading the Titans to finish with 3 wins, while other teams with traditional structures finished better. Quote, I don't think the structure hasn't changed. We've still got the same structure. I think all those are unique to the respective organizations of how they want to do it. And this is the way that we're going to structure this. We believe this is the right structure for us. So I don't know how you want to answer. I don't know how you want me to answer that, but I'm just telling you, this is the structure and this is how we're going to operate.
What did he say? Did he say
the
structure?
About,
it was the structure, too. And now it's not the structure, but it is the structure. Am I understanding that right? Like he's saying that there was a structure.
He's not very good at explaining this. The other thing that stands out to me when you try to just put aside all of the words that don't come out very clear is somewhere in here with the structure, he has sold Amy Adams. He and maybe some others have sold Amy Adams that Ran Carthon is not the right guy for the structure and the system going forward. There was a huge moment in Vanderbilt sports history back in 2003 where the Chancellor Gordon Gee basically came out with a huge press conference and a long thing about how they were going to eliminate the athletic program and make the athletes more in tune with the regular students. And it was very wordy, and the word intramurals, there'll be no different than intramurals. And everybody just freaked out. But when you really weeded through it, basically what he did was he fired the athletic director, Todd Turner, and put David Williams in there. And David Williams was not, this is where we get into titles, he was not named the athletic director for a number of years. So he did this wowie kazowie big press release. He got ripped for it, and then he had to walk it back and do a lot of things. But when you really weeded through everything, it ended up being a good thing. They invested more in the athletic program, but what he really wanted to do was fire Todd Turner. And so I think there's a little bit of that to this with the Chad Brinker thing. This is a very elaborate thing about the structure and the vision and all these things, but really what it was they fired Ran Carthon.
Yeah, so it had nothing to do. Well, I guess it did have something to do with the structure because they didn't want him to be a part of the structure because the structure that they had is still in place.
And so they had to sell Amy on that because Amy's got to pay Ran, right? They had to sell Amy on that because Amy's got to pay
paying
Ran
too many
for 4
damn
more
people
years.
that ain't working. That's the thing. And that goes to, the other problem. Okay, you convince her, so theoretically, you convinced her to fire him. You still got to pay him. If you don't get this right, what happens? Now she's going to be on the hook unless these guys get other jobs. Then I think the pay is supplemented. Whatever they're not paying, you got to pay. But you're establishing a line of, you're still paying people and you still haven't gotten the job right. I think that's the problem that is slowly occurring. Do I hope it stops? Absolutely. I hope that Brinker and Borgonzi are together for the next decade and they're winning a bunch of games. But as we know, with Amy, whether she's given full authority to Brinker or not, if she wants to change tomorrow, she will. And she'll fire him, and that'd be another person that she ends up paying without working in her building.
Right.
I want Willie's opinion. Speaking of Amy Adams Strunk, I want Willie's opinion on this because he wasn't with us yesterday when we were discussing this. Amy Adams Strunk was not present at this news conference. We went back and looked this up during the show. She was at Ran Carthon's introductory news conference. She was at Brian Callahan's introductory news conference. You can go back, and I'm sure she was at John Robinson and Mike Vrabel's introductory news conferences. But she was not there yesterday. I guest moderated Jared versus Joe yesterday, and Joe won based on the fact that he was very upset. He thought it was a big deal that Amy Adams Strunk wasn't there. Jared thought it was no deal that she wasn't there. I think it's a little deal. I'm close. I'm not as upset about it as Joe, but I'm closer to Joe than I am to Jared. Derek was passionate about this yesterday, Willie. Where do you fall on Amy Adams Strunk not attending this news conference yesterday?
I admit it is a change. I don't think it's a big deal. I'm going to go back with what I've always said about owners in general. It's the owner's prerogative whether you want to be a public speaker and figure. But if you're not one, and I think she is continuing to come to the conclusion she's not comfortable doing this. She doesn't like being out front. She's been burned in the past, I think, for when she does do the interview. It's very staged. It's very protected, things like that. And it just hasn't played very well. So she may have come to the conclusion, I don't want to do that anymore. I saw a tweet from Paul Kuharsky basically saying that she doesn't really want to do this anymore, make the football decisions. She wants to entrust people to make these decisions. And that's fine. The key is if Chad Brinker is going to be your guy and Bart Nihil is going to be your guy, those two have to really be good at connecting with the fans, delivering the message, and showing leadership. And right now, I have not seen that much to give me a lot of confidence from Brinker or Nihil in terms of being the out front leaders of a successful organization. But really, I think that's what Amy Adams looks like she's doing right now. She's putting it, the non-football, the business side for Nihil and the football side for Brinker. You guys do it. Build me a good organization. If that's what her vision is, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that if those two guys are the right guys.
My stance on this, by the way, Willie, before Derek responds, was if that's what she wants to do, I am okay with that. But she has to stay that way. She has to become, I think Paul Kuharsky, speaking of Paul Kuharsky, said this morning when filling in for Robbie on Robbie and Rex Road, that if yesterday was the first day of the Amy Adams Strunk as absentee owner era, that's fine. But she has to stay that way. And if and when the Titans become good again, she can't be out there at the tailgates and hanging out with fans. Like if you're out, this is what I said yesterday. If you're out now, you're out. Stay out. That was my thought on that.
Well, I mean, that's not going to happen.
I know, but that was just my opinion on the matter.
But I do listen. I was listening to Chase and Big Joe. I like listening to their show right at the beginning while I'm getting ready. And Joe brought up, hey, listen, Amy is like, and I'm just paraphrasing what Big Joe said. Amy is a closer. That's what she's being used as, the closer. At this point, this is how it's being perceived, that she's just being used as a closer. A closer to what, Derek? Well, a closer to that big behemoth of a stadium that's being built that is costing what, $2 billion. That's what she was the closer on. So what? So what does that mean, Derek? Well, she's gonna come, she's gonna shake hands, she's gonna be here more times than not. And she's going to do all those things. Miss Amy, you got to be here. Shake the hands of the fans. You know, that stadium over there, we got it. And again, I understand that part. If you're asking somebody for something, you can't be absent then. You got to be in their face. Now the caveat is when you get what you want, do you still do that? Or do you walk away like, I got what I want, let me move on to something else? It's starting to feel like, I'm not saying it is, but it's starting to feel like that she was like, yeah, got what I wanted. Thank you, Titan fans. Now I'm going. And Bert Nihil, you just make sure they keep coming. And Brinker, you're in control of everything. I don't want to have, I did my job. I got the stadium built. I'm getting people to buy PSLs. Let's go. I'll see y'all when the season starts. That's the way some fans are perceiving it to be. And if that's the case, then you're going to lose every time. You are. So, like you said, Adam, if you're absent now, some people are saying just stay absent. I hope the team start winning. The city hopes that this team brings a Lombardi trophy to the city sooner rather than later. But if that's the way you're going to operate, then stay on that side of the fence for a while. Let's win and let's just all be together. But Amy, you just stay over there. You did your job.
615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on all things Titans. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck will join us. We'll ask him about the Titans hiring of Mike Borgonzi. We'll also get into their draft process. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, Willie Donick will come back momentarily. He's on his way to the arena with the Predators. He'll join us when he gets there. But on our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com, our friend Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. Tim, great to talk to you. Since we last spoke, the Tennessee Titans have hired Mike Borgonzi as their general manager. And I hate to do this because I hate when people do this to me. You're from Massachusetts. He's from Massachusetts. I'm wondering if you have any sort of prior relationship with Mike Borgonzi, and maybe can share some insight into Borgonzi as a football executive, and generally speaking, what you think of the hire of Mike Borgonzi.
Hey, listen, it's a small state, okay? I think it's a wicked awesome hire, and but no, our paths have not crossed, and but look, by all indications, and also just like where he's coming from and that type of thing. Look, I think I would be, I think people should be encouraged by it. I mean, I think I would just, kind of say that. And then obviously, walking into a situation where, look, there obviously needs to be, changes and there, but, you don't have the, 29th pick in this year's draft, and so like you're walking, you're not in a division that, has quarterbacks in the three other cities that you play that, you don't know how you're ever going to beat. So I do think that, I also think it's a situation that you're walking into that's not perfect. It's typically the case, but it's also not as daunting as maybe some of the other situations around the league.
So Chad Brinker yesterday said that, quote, I'd love to have 30 draft picks over the next 3 years, and 12 of those picks come from the top 100. That would be ideal. Is the only way that the Titans can do that trading back in the first round, or are there other avenues they can go down to accumulate those picks?
Yeah, I don't think it always has to be because he was talking about it over how long period were you saying he was talking about that? Like
he said he would love to have 30 picks over the next 3 years, 12 of which come in the top 100.
Yeah. I mean, so look, over the next 3 years, yeah. I mean, if you talk about over the next 3 years, you probably have to do something with, this year's first rounder. But look, and that's probably an aggressive, approach. Even doing so with like the first rounder this year. Now, that being said, like, look, maybe it doesn't end up being that. And it might even be a little more like, look, this is the general plan. This is the type of thing of how we want to build it and think we can build it. And having picks, early in the draft is how we think, we're best suited to do that. So some of it might be, hey, not necessarily like hold me to the exact number over the exact time frame. But I think generally speaking, yeah, like, look, you do. But even in all of that, I like, if I look at two teams right now, and obviously like they're teams that have gotten it right at quarterback, but look at a team like the Ravens. There's been turnover. They've gotten it wrong sometimes with draft picks, but they've gotten it right as well. But the other thing they've done is like they've beaten the market at times with veteran players. Now it hasn't manifested in Super Bowl wins, but like if you say, look, when Calais Campbell was there, they were beating the market with Calais Campbell. They obviously are beating the market with a guy like Van Noy. Like they were maybe doing that with other defensive players that were a little bit older that they added. I think you could say the same thing because they were the right guys about, the Washington Commanders. So they got it right at quarterback, but are they beating the market when they get Bobby Wagner? You know what? Yeah, they probably are beating the market with like an older player that isn't as expensive. So I think you have to do both, right? Like, hey, yeah, they drafted De'Ami Brown. He's a good player. They drafted the quarterback. They got that right. And Terry McLaurin was a drafted player that they got it right with, but you still also have to get it right in free agency.
Talk with Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst and head coach of the Ensworth Tigers. Tim, I told him to just ask you, listen, if y'all had a neighborhood football game, who would win? Your hood or his? That settles everything.
Norfolk
right
versus Everett, Massachusetts. Who wins?
That will settle everything.
He's from Everett. Like, Listen, I love my hometown, but they were quite the field with us.
So the Hasselback brothers couldn't get it done?
Listen, like we would do our best, and like there's a few former Patriot players that live in my old town, but like Everett is a little tougher from those streets.
North of Charleston, Charlestown, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Everett's like if you, and this is real, like if you go look at listen, Boston College's roster, but you go look at Michigan's football roster the last few years, you're gonna find some kids from Everett on the University of Michigan's roster.
Oh, okay. Why am I don't like them
because
they're on the Michigan roster. I don't like them automatically. They could be good kids. They could be good kids. But you go to the University of Michigan, then I automatically don't like them.
If you don't know this, Tim, if Derek were to type University of Michigan onto his computer, it would self-destruct.
It'll melt, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go green.
Go white. Tim, is it a little because we hear this a lot, and we even heard it a little bit in the transcripts from yesterday's presser with just Brinker. That wasn't a presser. I don't know what they called it, but it wasn't helpful to him at least. That looking at certain teams, you want to be Baltimore, you want to be Pittsburgh, you want to be this teams that have had longevity in regards to winning. Is it a little bit naive to think that, all of a sudden now we can be that team? It took them decades. It took them a long time to become consistent winners the way that they are. They have a format, and no matter what decade it's in, they've stuck to their format. So is it a little naive for the fan base when Brinker come out and say, well, Amy knows that this is what we want to do. We want to be like these organizations. And isn't it a little bit naive to think, okay, we can be that organization in the next year?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is, because I think you're right. I think it does undercut how difficult and how hard so many people work to make those organizations as stable and reliable and as successful as they've been. I was joking with Scott Van Pelt a little bit about, like he grew up in that area. He likes the Commanders. He's, I'm like, man, like Josh Harris must think like, I should have got into the NFL a long time ago. This is easy, right? Like you just buy the team, everyone hated them and their owner. They stunk, and draft a quarterback. And before you know it, you play in the NFC Championship game and everyone is talking about how amazing you are, right? It's like, well, like that's such an unusual path, what's going on in Washington right now. Like that doesn't happen. Like they just hit it out of the park with the quarterback, and Dan Quinn, has done a remarkable job. Like they're really fortunate that it's worked out that way. To your point, D. Mace, like John Harbaugh and the ownership there in Baltimore, like they fought their way through a lot of stuff, and they've gotten it right a lot, and they've weathered a lot of storms to be that successful. And there's been a ton of turnover in the personnel department, on the coaching staff, the players on the team, like all of that. I mean, you were part of it, at a stretch. So like, yeah, it is really difficult. I think it's something to aspire for, but I think everybody, truly knows how difficult it is.
Now, quickly, I'm gonna get off the Titans for a quick second here. Obviously, we know what the Dallas Cowboys and the owner Jerry Jones did in regards to firing Mike McCarthy. It was just like out of nowhere he fired him. Now, it's starting to surface that Brian Schottenheimer may be the next coach of the Dallas Cowboys. If that's indeed the case, congrats to Shotty. I was with him in New York with the Jets for a brief minute. Good guy. But are you surprised that he would be the guy, considering what Dallas has went through for decades, that he would choose to fire Mike McCarthy and then hire Brian Schottenheimer?
Yeah, hey, Nashville's own Brian Schottenheimer.
Yes, exactly.
Look, here's what I would say. Look, I think that as soon as Mike McCarthy had other people interested in him, because basically what they did was they just let his contract expire. As soon as he had other people interested in him, and Jerry Jones thought that he was going to have to negotiate, against somebody else, then I think it changed everything. Little known, I should say little known. Like, here's the thing: I think people don't talk about enough when they talk about the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
They're cheap. Like, that's been the issue. Like, Dak's contract, what's going on with Micah, what was going on with CeeDee Lamb. Like, if the Cincinnati Bengals did the stuff that Jerry Jones tries to do, negotiating with his players and his coaches, we would be blasting the Cincinnati Bengals for how cheap they are. But for whatever reason, maybe because he's just uber wealthy, like, people don't do it with the Cowboys in terms of how they treat and negotiate with their players and coaches. But they are. So what I would say is, look, Brian Schottenheimer knows a ton of football. He's been a very good football coach for a very long time.
His dad was a really good coach.
All of it. Like, he's equipped to be a very good head coach, coordinator, position coach. Like, it's in his blood. It's been his life. Like, he can do it. And, like, sometimes just in the hiring cycle and, there's a fair amount of self-promotion when you get coaching at that level, and he's probably, kind of beyond that, stuff in his life and career and that type of thing. But, like, he makes sense because, he's not going to cost $13 million a year, but he can definitely do the job and you can win with him. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, like, I think in some ways he's the perfect coach for Jerry Jones.
Tim, quickly before we let you go, assuming Brian Schottenheimer is going to Dallas, that leaves 3 openings: New Orleans, Jacksonville, and Las Vegas for coaches. Play matchmaker for us. Who do you think are the best coaches for those 3 jobs?
Well, listen, I think Mike McCarthy is a very good candidate at some of those spots. Look, I thought that Jacksonville was the most attractive job. I really thought that what's his name? Ben. I'm forgetting his last name. From
Balky.
I thought that he was going to go to Jacksonville. I thought that he wanted that. I thought that was a job that he wanted. I think we're going to see some other names come out there, to be honest with you. I think that we're going to have some names of coordinators that have quietly been in the interview process that we're going to see show up other places, right? So, like Liam Cohen's name was out there. It seems like he's out of some of these spots. I think there's going to be some coordinators that we haven't been talking about that end up showing up. And, so could be out of Cincinnati, could it be out of places like that where I think it's going to show.
I was thinking Ben Johnson.
Ben Johnson.
I was confusing the GM Bulky, which he's out now.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you said Johnson. Yeah, Ben Johnson. I thought Ben Johnson was going to Jacksonville. And maybe there were some things like in the front office that that kind of changed that situation. So, look, I'd be shocked if Mike McCarthy is not in it in this hiring cycle. I would not be surprised if we see somebody that does come from college. But I also think that, so I'm not really answering your question. Look, I think McCarthy is going to have his choice, though. I mean, I think that is my guess.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us on the Mace Vingan and Donick. Tim, great stuff as always. We'll chat soon.
Sounds good. See you guys.
Tim Hasselbeck joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. We'll get back into the Titans next. But before we do, tune into 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville tonight for MTSU men's basketball. The Blue Raiders take on Sam Houston. Tip-off is at 6:30 p.m. with the pregame beginning at 6. Coverage also available on the Totally Hits Nashville app and at totallyhitsnashville.com. D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt women's basketball. The Commodores will take on Arkansas at Memorial Gym with a 6:30 p.m. tip-off, and the pregame show starts at 6:15. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Vanderbilt women's basketball, presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball, coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium February 5th through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Willie Donick will join us at the top of the hour. He'll reconnect with us. Mike Borgonzi, new Titans GM, joining us at 12:30. So make sure to tune in for that. Derek, there was something that you heard from Chad Brinker yesterday. Mike Borgonzi actually answered the question first.
Mhm.
Then Chad Brinker revisited the question, which was asked by Paul Kuharsky later in the news conference. You pointed this out to us. It wasn't something that I think caught a lot of people's attention over the course of this roughly 30-minute news conference, but it did stand out to you. This was Chad Brinker yesterday.
Mike, you mentioned. I'll answer your question. I know you asked me as well. Big, fast, smart, tough football players love winning more than anything else, right? But when it comes to building the roster, of course, we want to be big and tough in the trenches. You want speed on the outside. But the question you're asking about the smart and toughness part, that's when we get with the coaching staff. That's part of roster building. You figure out what positions are the ones that you can get away with a little bit less. And that's something, the conversation we will have with Brian Callahan, we'll have with Denard Wilson on the defensive side of the ball, where maybe if you can't find the complete package, like what are those positions where we can get away, or where we actually need someone who is just a smart, tough, gritty football player. But there's other positions that you have to have the speed, you have to have the explosiveness, you have to have the size and the length to affect the game that way.
That was Chad Brinker yesterday. Derek, why did that response stand out to you?
Because and again, some people may have caught it, some people may not.
It was near the end of the news conference, I believe.
And it was a question that Paul asked pertaining to fast and physical. He asked the both of them, but Borgonzi answered it, and then after Borgonzi was finished, then that's when Chad jumped in, because they were about to go to another question, but Chad jumped in and gave his answer. And it was a little odd, because listen, I understand, there are certain things that you're looking for in a player. And I've said this, like, listen, and Willie explained this too when he was on last week. There are some guys that are, aces in the classroom, valedictorian, it doesn't matter. But then when they get on the competitive surface, whether basketball, football, baseball, hockey, for some reason they can't, that intelligence doesn't translate for whatever reason. I've seen it, and I've seen guys that may have struggled in the classroom each and every semester, but they get on the football field and all of a sudden it just hit, they get it, and it's quick, fast, in a hurry. And you try to explain the two, but you can't. So what I gather is this is what I want to know. When or what position doesn't require the intelligence, the football intelligence? Because that's what we always talk about. Football acumen, football IQ. I need all my players at every position to have a level of football IQ, a high level of football, because that come into play when it's 2 minutes left in the game or a minute left in the game. It's 4th and 10, and that guy jumps off sides, or that guy doesn't know what's going on, and he gets a pre-snap penalty, or after, a post-snap penalty. And what do we all say when we're watching that? Man, that was dumb. Like, how does he do that? When y'all go over this how does he do that? So if that happens, which position do you declare, oh, I don't need that intelligence? Because I need my defensive end to be highly intelligent when it comes to football acumen. I need my center. I need my defensive backs. I definitely need my linebackers. I need my wide receivers. Yeah, they need to be fast, but I need them to have intelligence and a football IQ to read the defenses at a high level, considering what defensive coordinators throw at you week in and week out. Look at Spagnuolo. I mean, that guy's a genius. Why? Because he throws a lot, because he knows his guys are able to retain it. I'm sure I just couldn't envision, at least me, when I'm evaluating the guy, say, man, he doesn't have, but let's put him there. No, because ultimately that will come back and bite you. So I need all my players to have a high level, and it can be done. I'm not saying anything that can't be done, because I've sat with these guys. The guys that can't do it, they don't play. The guys that can do it, they play. I don't care how much talent you have. If you can't get the job done from a intelligent standpoint, intellectual standpoint, football IQ standpoint, then I can't have you on my team.
So are there no positions where you can sacrifice a little bit of that?
The kicker, the long snapper. But tell me, because football has become so technical now, so why do you think they have all these analytics? I need you to have a high football acumen, IQ. Listen, you may struggle in the classroom. I get that. Everybody's not meant to be. Listen, when I went in the classroom, I struggled. I know Adam probably didn't struggle. My son doesn't struggle.
I struggle.
My daughter didn't struggle, but I did. Okay. But when I got on that football field, my IQ was high, very high. I can't explain why that's the case, but I need my players to have a high football IQ. Now, if he's just talking about the classroom stuff, then okay, I get that part. But you gotta have a high football IQ to play in this business for a long time. That's all I'm saying. And listen, it may not be a big thing. People may think I'm crazy for bringing this up or nitpicking. I get it, but these are the things that I listen to. I listen to these things and like, okay, since you said there's no dumb questions, then this is a question. Which really position can you sort of skim on the intelligence? IQ, football intelligence. Which position? Kicker? Oh yeah, you can. Okay. As long as you can kick the ball, man, that's all that matters to me.
There's some physics involved in that.
Exactly. And I'm not saying that the place kickers they don't have a high football IQ, because they do. But I'm just saying, if you're talking about a position, one position probably, yeah, the kicker and the punter.
615-737-1025. Something else that Chad Brinker said yesterday made the rounds. It even changed the betting market a little bit. We'll get to that next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Mike Borgonzi, Titans GM, joining us at 12:30. Our next segment, Mike Borgonzi. So be sure to keep it here for that. Jack is in Belle Meade on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Jack, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
I was wondering if you guys might have saw something that caught my eye. When Brinker was talking about what happened to Ram, is it just me, or did he kind of have that look like they just told him, shoved him out a door and shut the door behind him into a presser the same way that they ran that day to explain about Mike? Or am I reading too much into it?
Now, Jack, just to clarify, are you talking about in the news conference that was streamed or in the news conference that was held beforehand where we couldn't hear or listen to anything?
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was video,
Okay.
at least either on YouTube or I saw it on broadcast TV. So it must have been
in the
interview
Borgonzi
somewhere.
news conference then. Thanks for the call, Jack. I'm not sure what he's referring to. Willie, Derek, do you know what he's talking about?
I'm not sure. But see, again, and this is what we've been trying to explain to the Tennessee Titans by way of our airwaves. The perception that the fan base have of you and the organization, Miss Amy, is that things are not quite the way that y'all try to make it seem. I'm not sure what the caller was talking about. I'm gonna go back and watch it, but if he picked it up and he's thinking that, then why is he thinking that? Well, he's thinking that because of things that have happened in the past and expressions, or like he's right. When y'all threw Rand up there, it was like Rand was like, I don't know. They fought, like, basically it took him a long time to explain what was going on. He kind of went around in circles. Why? Because it seemed like the fan base perception is you did what you needed to do or what you wanted to do, and then you told Rand to go talk about it. Well, that's the way the caller felt yesterday when that question, or when Brinker got to talking about Rand Carthon, was that, to him, to the listener or the person that was watching it, it made him feel like, they did to Rand what they're doing to Brinker what they did to Rand. Basically, I'm not saying it's true, but this Titans, this is the perception of your organization right now as we sit, and y'all haven't done anything to change it.
It's just I think the key is it is a perception of not really having the lead dog. We talked about, I mentioned the Wolfpack yesterday. You got to have the leader, right? You can have as many people in the Wolfpack as you want. Assistant GM, director of scouting, vice president of football operations. You can have any number of titles in the Wolfpack. But the bottom line is, if you take a look at the last 5 years or so, it started while Vrabel was still the coach. They didn't draft very well, and it was moving in this direction. And you got to have the Wolfpack's moving, but you knew trouble was coming, and you need good leadership to get through. And that's where I think they've fallen off. And so whatever is going on, we can debate it all we want. None of us are in there, right? And we got to hope now that Mike Borgonzi is sort of given the chance to be the leader of the pack, the captain of the ship. That's really what it comes down to. Who is the leader? They don't have anybody in there right now in football or in business side that really comes across as a good, strong leader of an organization that you want to get behind, right? And it's being used to say, well, if you're not very good at communicating your message to the fans, it stands to reason you're not very good at putting together a plan to get good football players.
And Rand said it. I'm glad you brought up the whole Wolfpack. Rand talked about that in I think in his opening press
The
conference
hunting
about
together,
hunting
whatever
together,
that
because
was. Yeah.
hunting and hunting together isn't the same thing. We all could be hunting, but are we all hunting together for the same thing and the same goal? So Rand said that back then, and so we thought that that's the way it was, that we all were they all were hunting together for the same thing. But now when they explain it, this whole new sort of wolf pack, now it makes it seem like we really wasn't hunting together. We were hunting, but all of us really wasn't hunting together.
So another part, I think, of having the Chad Brinker news conference before the Mike Borgonzi news conference was that so the focus was on Borgonzi during the news conference, because if Brinker had not held the powwow with reporters beforehand, a lot of the questions at the news conference would have been to Chad Brinker about firing Ran Carthon.
Yeah.
I think the Titans wanted to make sure all of those questions were answered before Mike Borgonzi took the stage. But Brinker was asked multiple questions during his pseudo news conference about Ran Carthon. The first question he was asked was about the team's decision to move on from Ran Carthon, because other than some quotes we read from Jim Wyatt and Paul Kaharski and Teron Davenport, among others, we actually haven't heard from Chad Brinker. And he said in part, quote, "My thinking hasn't caught up with my feelings. And that was a very hard decision. This is a hard business that we're in. It can be a good business, but it's a difficult life. And I have the utmost respect for Ran Carthon. He's a friend. He meant a lot to me personally and professionally. And it's just disappointing we got to the spot that we got to. I do miss him. We do communicate. Yeah, it's been tough. It's mixed emotions. It's been a tough couple of weeks, I'll say that. But he's got a beautiful family. I appreciate him so much. Yada, yada, yada. But then, there are other questions being asked of this. And I think you could tell in reading the transcript that Brinker was getting a little tired of answering these questions. I think he said at some point, "Are we clear on what's going on? Can we move on from this? Can we turn the page?" Like, you could tell that he was reaching his wit's end. But the fact of the matter is, people want to know these things. And perception in this case, as you said, Derek, is reality. The Titans have not done a good job of communicating all of this with their fans, which allows us to try to fill in the blanks ourselves. And that is why there is, again, a perception of Chad Brinker as someone who used office politics and backstabbing and maybe even a little front stabbing to get to where he is today. Tristan is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Tristan, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Since Mike is coming on the air soon, could you ask him about Cam Scadaboo and Sam Levitt from ASU and Simmons from Arizona State, who played at Austin Peay, then transferred to Arizona State?
Thank you for the call, Tristan. We appreciate the question, and we will try to get as many questions to Mike Borgonzi at 12:30 as we can. And I say this as respectfully as I can. I don't think those questions are going to make the cut, but we do appreciate the call. Trey is on our.
I don't think he would say anything about a particular player.
Trey is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Trey, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, my guys.
How are you?
How's it going today?
Good.
Hey, I have a couple questions. My first question would be to him is, sir, who have you recruited? And are they still playing in the NFL? And what have you done to improve a team to make them better? And I feel like we're getting a bunch of poo-poo burger.
That doesn't sound very good.
I say that because I know somebody that played with Kansas City. All I have to do is go on my Facebook to my messenger and ask them what he did in Kansas City. He played with Kansas City. Travarius Ward is my friend from back home. I can ask him what he did in Kansas City. I'm sick of them playing with us. This is too much. I want to know who's making the call, and we want to see more transparency. And Derek's right. We want to see transparency, and they won't give that to us. And they have failed us. They have failed the Titans fans. And I love you guys, and y'all have a good day, okay?
Thanks, Trey. Watch out
Thank
for
you.
any poo-poo burgers out there.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't eat any poo-poo burgers today. But
Eh,
to Trey's point before you go, Derek,
Mhm.
one of the first questions to Borgonzi yesterday from Paul Kaharski was, can you give us an example of a player or players
Mhm.
that you stood on the table for and helped influence the Chiefs, whether it was through draft, free agency? And Borgonzi said, to summarize, I wouldn't put my stamp on any particular player. And to Trey's point,
Right, but I think he was trying to say he didn't want to take credit.
Yes.
It was a team effort. I think
For sure. No, for sure. For sure.
He didn't want to say, let me pat myself on the back and say, I discovered this guy, and this guy.
But in
I
these
think he was trying
situations,
to-
like Trey, fans want proof of concept, right? They know that Mike Borgonzi came from Kansas City. They know that Kansas City is a successful franchise. We've learned that he was part of a small decision-making circle with Brett Veach and Andy Reid. And I think it was Albert Breer said that his fingerprints are on some of these moves. But fans want proof of concept. I go back to the story, speaking of Paul Kaharski and bringing him up a lot on this program. He wrote a story. Actually, it was Joe Rexrode, I think. Joe Rexrode. I'm sorry.
Retract
Never mind,
that. It wasn't Paul.
Enough of you, Paul. Joe Rexrode wrote a story about Derrick Henry. And the reason why I bring up Paul Kaharski was because Blake Bedingfield, who writes for PaulKaharski.com, he was the person that helped sway John Robinson to draft Derrick Henry. And people want that proof. People want, like Trey, okay, Mike Borgonzi, did you have a hand in drafting Rashee Rice? Did you have a hand in drafting who's another, Xavier,
okay, but
Xavier
I
Worthy?
see your point.
Yes.
Adam, I see the point, but I will ask the question. Does it really matter? He's been hired. He's going to be judged on how he does as the Titans GM.
Well, it does matter.
If that makes you feel better that he goes off his list of accolades, then I certainly see the point. He is the guy, and people will not remember any of that. That's like trying to say I want to win the press conference. The point is, in the interview process, they got a pretty good feel that he has done well for the Chiefs in that capacity, and that was enough to get him the job.
Well,
but of course, that doesn't make anybody feel better from the fans right now. But that's again going towards are you trying to win the press conference? To me, it's much more important of how are you going to go use the first pick. He's going to be judged on how he does from here forward.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. But yeah, it probably didn't matter, or I'm not going to say it didn't matter, because I'm sure there had to be some instances where they went into that interview and they said, well, give it an example, Borgonzi, of what you did and who. I'm sure that had to be one of the questions within the interview. And I'm sure, and if he gave the same answer, then great. But I think in that business, there is some guys that are humble, but even the humble ones, when you ask them, they're going to tell you it's not because I'm bragging. It's because I'm telling you I'm prepared for this job. And this is one of the reasons why I'm prepared for this job. We talked about, Kansas City and that whole process with drafting Mahomes. I think it was Todd. Who was it that sort of that finagled it all to get Mahomes the test and make sure he said the right things? It all came out. Why? Because that person was like, this is what I did. That's a guy standing on the table. That's a situation or example of a guy going that extra mile to make sure, hey, listen, I vouch for this guy. He's good. I'm going to make sure, but I'm going to stand on the table and I'm going to make sure this is my guy. I'm sure just about every GM and assistant GM has that one moment. Again, we're not asking you to brag or anything else, but okay, tell me why you're good for this job. What example can you give me? I understand it was a collaboration and nobody really cared about titles, but give me an example of where you showed authority, you showed leadership. That's all. That's all I'm saying. And that's all the fan base want to hear.
And in the job interview,
Uh-huh.
I'm sure he would handle that question differently than he did at the press conference. I just think at the press conference, maybe he was a little caught off guard, didn't have a name top of mind. I mean, he's been through, I don't know, 10 drafts, more than 10 drafts as a part of the Chiefs. So I think he probably just chose not to brag, etc. I will point out that Rand Carthon did bring up some examples of 49ers guys when he was asked a similar version of that question, and that certainly didn't help Rand, instill confidence in his circles because he's out of a job. So again, what you say in the press conference to me, I know we're all over it now because it's such a fresh new story, and he's such an important guy, Borgonzi, going forward, especially after.
But it's the expectation level that is set.
I know. I don't think in a few months we're going to worry about it too much.
They're winning.
I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he had a big role in the Chiefs to have drafted pretty well over the years and built a good foundation. Just like Rand Carthon, there was nothing wrong with his credentials coming in. I was very satisfied with his different experiences at different levels, but at the end of the day, he didn't get it done.
No, you're right.
I found this tweet from.
I thought he was a very engaging guy to listen to, especially when he first got hired.
I found this tweet from Sam Phelan of A to Z Sports from January of 2023. New Titans GM Rand Carthon operated the lower rounds of the draft in his time with the 49ers. Players Carthon helped San Francisco acquire in rounds 5 through 7 since being hired in 2017. Names include George Kittle, Dre Greenlaw, Jawan Jennings, Elijah Mitchell, Brock Purdy. So I hear both sides. Willie, I understand your point. I also understand Trey's point. And it goes back to the erosion of hope and trust that Titans fans have in the front office. By all accounts, people who are much smarter than me, who follow these things closely, I've read many things that say that this was a home run hire by the Titans. And it's easy to say that now. That Mike Borgonzi is a great GM hire, all of those things. But it's easy in these situations, I think, sometimes for fans to see where that person is coming from and say, well, they turned around this team or they were part of this great team, so therefore they're going to make our team great. And I think it's an interesting situation because, as I said, I hear your side of it, Willie. I also understand Trey's side that Titans fans want to know, okay, Mike Borgonzi, name one player who is a key impact player for the Chiefs that you were in on first, that you convinced Andy Reid and Brett Veach, hey, take a shot on this guy. He'll be great for us. And he ultimately was. Because, as I said, people want proof of concept. Unfortunately, most of the time, Derek, it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And maybe and listen, because I'm sure when that article was written about Rand Carthon, he went around and talked to various people, and they probably gave him that story. Those people that he talked to, individuals that he talked to, maybe Rand didn't give them all those names. It was people that they talked to. And so when you present it to the fan base, it's a proof of concept. Like, okay, you've done it before. It may not, ultimately, it didn't help him. I get that, Willie. But when you are introducing someone to the fan base, especially after what has transpired, they need proof of, like, what is it that you did that was special that you bring here to Nashville? And it can't be Brinkert's response, Borgonzi. That's why everything Borgonzi. It can't be that response. Okay, it's Borgonzi and Borgonzi. Okay, I get it. Collaboration, but again, why you? That's all. And I'm not, again, I'm not saying that Borgonzi isn't qualified, because I think he's highly qualified and he's catching strays because of Brinkert. We understand that, but that is a legitimate sort of thought by the fan base. Like, okay, what is going to make you any different? Just because your name is Mike Borgonzi, like Brinkert said? That can't just be, and I know you don't think that way, meaning Borgonzi.
615-737-1025. Speaking of Mike Borgonzi, new Titans GM Mike Borgonzi will join us coming up next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Happy Thursday, everyone. This is Derek Mason, and you heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal to shed some extra pounds only to come up short. But I got a solution for you. And it's my good friends over at Cool Springs MD and Dr. Lodge and his team, because they understand the frustration of this cycle. And that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize their program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. We are awaiting new Titans GM Mike Borgonzi. In the meantime, let's get to some of your texts at 615-737-1025. One texter says, I think people forget that it takes more than just one person to fix a messy situation. You can have the manager at the #1 Costco in the nation leave his job to go manage a messy Walmart, and that Walmart could still suck, and that Costco could still be #1.
Yeah, you got a point.
I suppose that's true. I'm partial to Costco myself.
Yeah.
Let's see some other questions. Bob wants to know why we haven't heard anything about a Mike Keith replacement. Well, I imagine that is an exhaustive search.
Exactly.
To replace.
They better get that one right.
Mike Keith. Yes, that absolutely needs to happen. Actually, David has Michael. It says Michael Borgons on the phone, so this can only mean one thing. As we await.
Did we shorten his name to just Michael Borgons?
It just says on the phone, Michael Borgons.
You think he'll take that? Can we just start calling him Borgons?
I think his friends call him Borgons.
Yo, we're not his friends yet.
Let us welcome new Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi to the program. Mike, Adam Vingan, Derek Mason, Willie Donick here with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Nashville.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely.
It's been a whirlwind these last few days, but it's great to finally get settled in.
I can only imagine. We appreciate you taking some time to join us. So the Titans find themselves, Mike, in a similar position as the 2012 Chiefs. And for those who don't know, those Chiefs went 2-14, had the #1 pick in the NFL draft. I'd love for you to get into the weeds with us a little bit. What were the key components of that turnaround, and how will that inform your process here with the Titans?
You know, when I look back to that team, there were some pieces on the team that we had. We had some talented guys. But of course, you know, we needed to build a foundation of guys through the draft. And one of the biggest things for us was just finding those core guys for us, you know, to kind of change the culture. So we did some things in free agency that year. We didn't make a ton of moves, but, you know, we signed, I think I mentioned in my presser, guys like Mike DeVito, Anthony Fasano at the time, you know, really just to fill some holes before the draft, but also really to build that foundation in the roster with the right type of guys, character guys, culture guys. And then, you know, our process really was to draft and develop. You know, we drafted Kelsey that first year in the 3rd round. And just continued to stack guys through the draft. You know, we were able to solidify the quarterback position that year with Alex Smith. We ended up trading for him in San Francisco. So those are the things we had to do first. I mean, #1 was solidify the quarterback position, and then start building the guy with, you know, the roster with culture guys, and started identifying those type of players.
Let's talk about that quarterback position for a minute. As you evaluate the quarterback market this offseason, be it the draft, be it free agency, or via trade, if you find that there is no franchise-changing quarterback, someone that you can build around, what do you do?
Then you have to bridge the gap. You know, I think these discussions, I'm just diving into it right now. You know, I wasn't watching the top quarterbacks during the season. We had one, obviously, in Kansas City with Patrick. So I'm diving in the process right now with an open mind. You know, I'm getting with Coach Callahan, his staff, our personnel staff. And we're going to look through free agency. We're going to look through the draft. You know, however trades, whatever we have to do to solidify that position. But we're pretty early on in the process right now.
Is there an archetype of quarterback you're looking for in terms of the attributes that player needs to have?
Well, you know, #1 is leadership. I mean, that position is the face of the franchise. So we're looking for a leader of men that the team will follow. I think that's first and foremost. And then we'll get through they come in all shapes and sizes and athleticism. And, you know, a lot of this is from the neck up too, and how you can process information as a quarterback. So, you know, some guys have more mobility than others. But, you know, what we're looking at, there's no specific, you know, type we're looking at right now. You know, we just want to make sure the intangibles are there. And there's going to be guys that run a little bit faster, that have stronger arms. You know, we want to get the best fit here for the Titans. So that's really the process that we're working through right now.
New Titans GM Mike Borgonzi joining us here on the program. Mike, you said yesterday that the Chiefs weren't really concerned about job titles. And Chad Brinker also said yesterday that everybody's title here will get checked at the door. Both of you downplayed the concept of final say, which has been a hot topic of discussion around here for long before you arrived. In that case, how are disagreements settled, and whose opinion matters most in those situations?
Well, I mean, we had disagreements in Kansas City, but I think the most important part is you do have to check your ego at the door and make the best decision for the team. And there was never a point where we got in the draft and we were still discussing it. Like, we're going to be in meetings now for the next, 2 or 3 months here before the draft. And we're going to talk things out. I'll talk things out with Chad. I'll talk things out with Brian to make sure we're on the same page, whatever player we're acquiring. These things I understand the question yesterday with the 53, because that is, put into people's contracts. But I think the successful teams, meet and work together to find solutions to the problem. So there was never a point where there was infighting in Kansas City over certain things. We agreed on every pick that we made.
We're talking with Mike Borgonzi, Tennessee Titans' new general manager. Now, Mike, what has been your conversations with Brian in regards to the expectations, but also ensuring him that the organization will be patient, because you guys have talked a lot about patience in the position that you guys are in, potentially drafting a quarterback with the first pick. And young quarterbacks, everybody don't start off like Jaden Daniels or CJ Stroud, but knowing that you want to see progress, but how much patience will you show and ensure the head coach that, hey, listen, under this circumstances, we're going to be patient with you?
Oh, absolutely. That's all part of the plan. So whatever player we take, the developmental part is big, especially for the quarterback position. When we took Patrick, we had a plan for him. We knew we were going to sit him for a year. And you have to stay disciplined with that plan. And we had a guy like Alex Smith that could teach him throughout the whole year. So every situation is a little bit different. Every player is a little bit different. I know Jaden took off this year, year one. So, the most important thing is you have to have a plan coming in, and then to be able to adjust the plan as well. As you get through OTAs and training camp, if he's ready to play, we're going to play him. I think the most important part is having a plan and communicating it. And listen, we're a 3-win football team last year, right? So it's going to take some time to build up this roster. But we also feel the urgency to win now, and that's what we do want to do. So we're going to, be selective in free agency where we can, and we're really going to try to draft and develop. So, but the plan will always be tied to the hip with Brian in terms of the plan for the roster, though.
Yes, and I do understand that, but we all know that, when you're bringing in a young quarterback, if indeed that's what you guys choose to do, and you need him to play right away, and he shows that he can play right away, but there's still going to be some growing pains within it. But you're telling us that even though there's growing pains, the head coach know that through this process, we are dedicated to it, and we're going to be patient with him, the head coach, as well as the quarterback.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. We'll be on the same page with that. And we understand there's going to be growing pains. There's growing pains with every rookies. So we're going to be on the same page with that for sure.
Okay. Now, what was the process? Because I'm sure you had a front row seat, and you probably was more than likely a part of the discussions. So what was the process in trading, or the reason why you chose to trade for L'Jarius Sneed? Was it because of the needs, the contract? Because now you're the GM here. And do you still have those same concerns, being it that he did get injured this year, and they have been sort of coy with what the injury is truly in regards to Sneed? So do you still have those same concerns with him now that you are the GM on his team?
We didn't have many concerns with LJ. LJ was a huge part of our team, and we felt when LJ left us that was a huge void, and it is a big void, on that Chiefs roster right now. He was one of our, if not the top corner, him and McDuffie on the team. It comes down to when you get to a point where we're at with so many young players, and you're thinking year 2, year 3 with extensions for players. We had some pretty good draft classes. Extensions with Chris Jones. So you're forecasting your cap for the next 2-3 years. So that was strictly a cap management move that we had to make with LJ. But I'm happy LJ's here, and I can't wait to get with him. And we're going to get him back right here. But I'm looking forward to LJ having a big year here.
So there's no concerns with the knee in regards to Snead.
No, I'm not going to get into medical stuff,
Okay.
but there wasn't a concern with us. I mean, he
Okay.
played at an all-pro level that last year.
Mhm. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking to Mike Borgonzi, the brand new general manager for the Tennessee Titans. And Mike, welcome to Nashville. I had a great conversation with Pat Sperduto, a guy that you worked with for a long time, that we go way back here in Nashville from his days running the Nashville Cats, a colleague of yours. And he gave us a big endorsement of you. So that's great. He actually gave me a little note on you that I think would be fun to share. But he said your son is involved in professional wrestling. What is that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, Pat's one of my good friends. We worked together for 16 years in Kansas City, and he was a Boston guy. I actually grew up next town from me, so that's nice to hear that Pat said that about me. But yeah, no, my son is a big wrestling fan. I'm sure you guys saw the story with the shooting at the parade and Trey Smith. Yeah, I mean, if you guys have seen the story, there was a shooting at the parade, and Trey, really comforted my son Joey at the time, and he had that championship belt on. We were on the bus, so it kind of calmed my son Joey down at the time. So I'm forever grateful for Trey, because he's a tremendous human being, tremendous football player, and they actually got to go to the WrestleMania last year. So it was a pretty cool moment, under the circumstances. That was a tragedy that day. But yeah, no, he's a big wrestling fan though, and so is Trey. So there was a connection there.
Very interesting stuff. But Mike, you mentioned your Boston ties, and your accent gives you away, of course. And I married into a huge Red Sox family. My father-in-law was the baseball coach at Dartmouth for a while. My dad actually went to Princeton, so I've got some Ivy League ties. I'm just curious, with your Ivy League experience playing football, Brian. My father-in-law, if he's at our house, like, it doesn't matter if like Alabama's playing Tennessee or anything, he's going to be watching the Ivy League matches every Saturday. He's got me tuned in there. But what was that Ivy League experience like for you, and where do you think you took that into where you are now?
It was a great experience. So I went to Brown, which was about an hour, south of Boston. It was a great balance of, academics and athletics, and met a ton of good people there at Brown. Have long friendships there from Brown. But yeah, I mean, it was just a great place to network and the type of people that were there, and the league was still good. So I still follow Brown, and I'll have I'll have it on my phone. Usually, we're going away games, and I'm always tuning into those Brown games. So it was a great experience for me.
Mike, you kind of touched on this, the balance between building the roster to really open up a window for an extended period of time where you're contending every year, and also the urgency to try to make some progress early on. I know you're just sort of diving into where the roster is right now, but what do you think is the reasonable expectation for this coming year? Because you've said, hey, look, we need some time here. It's pretty obvious that they've got a lot of holes. Can all those holes be reasonably filled in 1 year, or do you think it's going to take a couple of drafts?
I think it will take a couple of drafts. But like I said, we're going to use free agency to supplement it. And listen, like I said, the first thing we have to do is solidify the quarterback position. And that usually, will give you a jolt to the team once we solidify that quarterback position. But we want to be patient in terms of just building the roster with youth, and getting that foundation in here to build the culture. But anytime you get a quarterback, in here that can play, you saw it in Washington this year, it can take the team to another level. So we understand that. And so that, that's our biggest priority, this off season.
Mike, one thing that sometimes gets overlooked, we talk about it a lot on our show. There's so much headlines for Patrick Mahomes and the success of the Chiefs, but you guys, when you were in Kansas City, of course, had a great defense. And we talk about a lot of offense and all the bells and whistles. You have to have the quarterback, but defense is so important these days if you watch. What was the key to being able to find the right defense and the right defensive personnel building around a quarterback that obviously is getting paid a big percentage of your salary cap?
That's important. I mean, that's where the draft really comes into play when, the quarterback and Chris Jones, and you get certain players taking a huge chunk of the salary cap space. So, we flipped the defense twice. We flipped it in 19, we flipped it in 22. And it was just an infusion of younger players that had to play right away. I think we had 3 or 4 of them starting in the Super Bowl in 22. That gave us complementary football. That's what we're looking for here. As much as, the offense gets the credit in Kansas City, it was really the defense that really carried us for the last couple of years. And, the offense got better throughout the year and made plays when they had to. But I think that's a big part of it. And, just being young, fast, things I talked about in the presser yesterday, that was our philosophy, building that defense, with just some high character guys too. And then having the synergy with the coaching staff. So we would get together with Spags and that whole defensive staff to see, exactly what type of player fit in that defense. So, that's the things that I'm going to be getting with Brian and Denard, to find the exact profile of the type of players that we want on that side of the ball.
Derek asked you just a minute ago about the trade of L'Jarius Sneed. I want to ask you about one other big trade you guys made that has really worked well, even though it had to be a hard one to do. And that when you guys traded Tyreek Hill and got some more assets, but were able to continue a lot of success without him. What goes into a big decision like that, where you have to kind of think about your cap and how you can try to go about replacing a guy of his caliber?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly did not want to lose Tyreek. And we were going through that rebuild where we flipped the defense in 19 and the defense started to age a little bit, a few years later. And we knew that we had some cap restrictions, going into the next couple of years in terms of extensions that we wanted to do with some younger players. So really when we made the move with Tyreek and we met, we were in the office for, 3-4 nights, probably till 2-3 in the morning, discussing this. It was a hard move for us, but we felt like it was the right move at the time because we really needed we needed an infusion on the defensive side. So, flipping Tyreek, we were able to, get some more draft picks with McDuffie and Karlaftis and start to really build the defense on that side. So those decisions are hard because, Tyreek was a huge part of our team and our offense those first few years there that we were winning. But that was really the reason that we did it because we knew we had to accumulate some more picks and really get that defensive side of the ball better. And like I said, that 22 draft, we ended up having, 3 or 4 of those guys starting in the Super Bowl for us.
Now, Mike, thank you once again for your time. We really do appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well. But one more question for you from me, at least. Brinker talked about the football IQ and which positions, because Paul Kuharsky asked him about, fast and physical over smart and gritty. And, you answered the question and then Brinker took over the rest. And he talked about, well, possibly there are some positions that you may not need sort of that smartness or that intelligence or what we all call football IQ. Can you be more specific in addressing which positions those are? Because he didn't go into which positions. But I would like, from my own knowledge, I would like to know which positions is that, because if I'm on a football field, I think every position should have a high level of football IQ, especially when it comes to play the last 2 minutes of the game, pre and post snap penalties. So can you identify which position that sort of pertains to?
When I came, I understand the question. but we're looking for smart players, across the board. Like you said, critical moments of the game. Those are the type of guys that make the plays that, don't have dumb penalties and do all that. So we're looking for smart positions, smart players across the board. There's going to be some positions emphasis. Obviously, the quarterback is a big one. The offensive lineman, intelligence piece, but every position on the football field there. Wide receivers. We're looking for smart players across the board.
Titans GM Mike Borgonzi joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Mike, thank you so much for your time. We hope this is the first of many conversations.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. And I'm super excited to be here in Nashville now, and we're heading down to the East-West today. So I can't wait to start the process now.
Thank you for your time, Mike. Talk soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
New Titans GM Mike Borgonzi joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. We will quickly react to what Borgonzi had to say. You can also text us, call us 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
Everybody, let's tell you about Loan Pronto. What could you do with an extra several $1,000s? Maybe you need $50,000. Maybe you need $100,000. You need some money for a home improvement project or to pay some bills. If you own a home, you can get that money in less than a week with Loan Pronto. Loan Pronto is the leader in quickly converting home equity into cold hard cash so you can put that money to use where you see fit. It's your money, so do it. Use Loan Pronto to help you with that. Especially if you live in our listing area, home values are really good these days. One client recently from Loan Pronto got $150,000 out, paid off their credit cards, 2 car loans, and a personal loan. And in the process, they cut their monthly expenses by $1,500 per month. So get approved in as little as 1 day with no hard credit pull. Call Loan Pronto and start the process. 615-499-5780 or go to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Get the money you need. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, the game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Before we head back to break, to welcome in Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet. Derek, your quick 60-minute reaction to what we heard from new Titans GM Mike Borgonte.
It's like, I mean, listen, he answered the questions the way he needed to answer them. Didn't give us much, gave us a little, regurgitated some of the things he said yesterday. But you can't sit here and say we didn't ask the questions, because we did. Now, we didn't get to all of our questions we wanted to get to. That would have taken probably like 30 more minutes or longer. But I think we got to some critical, we were able to ask some of the critical questions, and he gave us answers. So listen, he's the GM, and it's wait and see now. I know we had to ask these questions, and the answers that he gave us probably wasn't, he probably answered some questions for the audience, and he probably didn't answer some questions for the audience. But it's not because of the lack of asking. But he's a GM, and this is what GMs do. They answer the question without answering the question, and I don't hold that against him, not one bit. Because if the old man was still around, he would be saying the same things. He'd
And
be
chuckling
laughing,
along the way.
exactly, like, yeah, that's a GM right there. He's giving you something, but he ain't giving you nothing.
615-737-1025. We'll take a Titans break. We'll talk the Nashville Predators and the NHL with Sportsnet insider Elliot Friedman. That's next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, the game. D. Maceman, Ginandonic, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com by the incomparable Elliot Friedman, Sportsnet NHL insider. Elliot is brought to you by Old National Bank. Get old with Old National Bank. Elliot, I'm sure you saw the highlights the other night. The Predators, for the first time in their history, rallied from 4 goals down to defeat the San Jose Sharks 7-5. They've won a season-high 4 games in a row. Are you starting to see the Predators team that you anticipated seeing when the season began?
You know, it was funny. I was watching that game a little bit, and then I changed the channel. And all of a sudden, I started looking at the score on my Sportsnet app, and I was like, "Oh, I better change it back," because I don't think anybody was expecting that one the way it unfolded. I mean, I think it's hard to say. I mean, I like to see more of it. There's no doubt about that. I try to, Adam, I try not to overreact to small sample sizes, is what I would say. They're starting to play better. It looks like there's some life. I like the way things are trending. I would like to see them look like as we wake up today, you guys are 10 points out, and there's 5 teams between you and Calgary, which is in the second wild card spot. I'd like to see them give it a run. At least make it interesting. If they make it interesting, I'll be like, okay, that's a good second half of the season.
Speaking of that, Elliot, the Predators do have an opportunity to make it interesting because their schedule has softened up significantly between now and the start of the Four Nations face-off in a couple of weeks. They play a rematch with the Sharks tonight. They play Anaheim on Saturday. They play Buffalo twice in this stretch, I believe. They play Chicago. They host Vancouver next week. So they do have an opportunity to play teams around them in the standings. I was reading something from our friend Greg Wyshynski earlier today about just the state of the playoff race. And he wrote, quote, "The question, as it relates to the trade deadline, is whether GM Barry Trotz will use the trade deadline to fuel a flicker of playoff hope or get his Predators in a row for next season." How could you see Barry Trotz thread that needle if the Predators continue racking up points?
Well, I think this. I think the one thing that I do believe is that jobs are always on the line. If you're Barry Trotz, and you've already made some changes, right? But if you're Barry Trotz, you're not going to be able to sell the same team coming back next year. So between now and either the trade deadline or jumping past that, the draft, the summer, you're going to be making changes. You're not going to come back with the exact same group. You're going to have to do some things here and there. Now, I think, it's been a year of seismic changes. He made some of the biggest acquisitions last year and free agency. I don't know if you can do that every year. So if I was some of maybe the depth players or maybe not the core group, but sort of like the support group, which is important, I would be wondering about that. Like last week when I was on, we talked about McCarron. We talked about Sissons. The other thing too is if I was one of your top prospects, and I know you guys have had a lot of injuries in Milwaukee, but I would be sitting there and I would be saying, all right, what can I do here? I've got to know, I've got to be doing things that are going to let the organization know I'm ready for a spot next year. Like, that's the thing I'd be looking at right now. I mean, he's looking for a center. He's looking around at some of those things. I think that if I was a guy who thought I could make an impact next season, I would be doing everything I could to be showing that, whether I was still in the American League or I was up in the NHL. Those are the guys who have to be looking and saying, all right, that's where the changes could come. Like, I've heard a little bit of McCarron out there. I do think he's a guy who teams like. I think if you're him or you're the Predators, you're sitting there and saying, after March 7th, is he going to be there? I think, now that it looks like the cap is going to go up a bit, I think, not like assistance is a huge number, but you're probably a bit more comfortable with some of the term. If I was him or I was the Predators, I'd be looking and saying, okay, what's my situation going to be? Those are the kinds of things I think you're thinking right now. He's not coming back with the same group. So where are the changes going to be? I think you can look at your roster and kind of figure out what could be on the table here.
And before we get to Derek, one note: Predators and Sharks rematch tonight. Yaroslav Askarov expected to start against the Predators tonight. He did not start the other night here in Nashville, but he is expected to start tonight in San Jose. But Elliot, Derek has a question for you related to this subject.
Yeah, I mean, you gave up the boo signs, and I'm sure Predator fans are really interested in this matchup, not because San Jose is some juggernaut, but because of Askarov and what we thought of him and what the fan base thought of him during that time, and then obviously the Predators ultimately trading him to the San Jose Sharks. Now, what are you expecting in this matchup in regards to Askarov? And do you think that whatever narrative has been set in this situation, will it be changed tonight?
No, I don't know if one game is going to change anything, Derek. I have to say, and you guys asked me about this last week, I was disappointed Askarov didn't play in Nashville for the pure entertainment of it all. Look, the Sharks have to do what they think is right? Like they're purely about what is right for San Jose, and I get that. But I would just say, like, if I was ever good enough to play in the NHL and I returned to the building under those circumstances, I would want that start. Good or bad, I would just want to come out there against my former team. That's just me. I would want the harder start. It's going to be interesting. It's weird. You don't often see this kind of back to back where a team plays one game, where two teams face each other on Tuesday, then they go 75% of the way across the country and play again on Thursday. That's a weird one. But I would want, and that will make it challenging on its own, but I would want the more uncomfortable start. So I was disappointed from a purely entertainment point of view that he didn't play. Look, Derek, I just don't ever say, one game changes everything. Especially not a game like game 45 in the schedule in the middle of January. I think that once you guys signed Juuse Saros, and that was the right decision for the Predators, it was only a matter of time before Askarov was going to play somewhere else. Now, Barry Trotz wanted it to happen on his own time. He didn't want it to happen on Askarov's time, but Askarov and his representative, they pushed it across the finish line. And there's always going to be a little bit of hard feeling for that. But at the end of the day, if the Nashville Predators had a choice, 7 years of Juuse Saros or whatever the other option was going to be, at that time there was only one vote. And that was the right choice. And that was 7 years of Saros.
Now, Elliot, you did mention, hey, listen, the remainder of the season for the Nashville Predators, you want to see them make this interesting. Now, will they ultimately end up making the playoffs? It looks highly unlikely, sitting where they are sitting at this point. But, looking at this team, do you think the people, you included, in the hockey world, is going to look at the Nashville Predators, if they do make this run but still not make it, look at it as a missed opportunity for this franchise, because you assembled a team that you felt can win now, and they started off very slow, and then they seem to pick it up, or they are picking it up. Do you think around the hockey world they will look at it as, man, they had a great opportunity? I'm just talking about this year, that they had a great opportunity based upon the way they played the second half of the season. That if they had gotten it together a little bit sooner, this could have been a really deadly team once they got in the playoffs.
I think unless they make the playoffs, Derek, you're going to look at this season as being disappointing. I just don't think there's any other way to look at it, right? I think the one thing that's important is if you finish strong, you can sell yourself for next year. Like if the Predators finish the season really poorly, the fan base is going to be looking at it like, okay, it started bad, it ended bad. Like, what is there to like about any of this? If you start poorly, but you end strong, at least you can say, okay, there was a lot of change, but the way it ended, maybe they've all figured it out and we're going to be better. That's the way I look at it. But if you don't make the playoffs this year, it's going to be seen as a disappointment. You look back, I always look at the end of the year, what I always do, Derek, is I always go back and I look, what did I think about this team at the beginning of the year and how close did it come? Did I think they were going to be good and they underachieved? Did I think they were going to be bad? Like, I look at Columbus. I did not know what to expect about Columbus this year. And I watch them and they're fighting and they're scratching and they're clawing and they're in the race. And to me, that team is a success. Right now, you look at Nashville and what we expected at the beginning of the year, it's a disappointment. Now, you can erase some of that. You can create optimism for next year. But it's going to be hard to, it's going to be hard to overcome what happened at the beginning of the season. It's like, Derek, it's like one of my coworkers is Craig Simpson. He scored 50 goals one year in the NHL. He was a hell of a player. And he always says to me, beware of the team that finishes great when there's no pressure. Well, I think there is pressure on the Predators to send a notice to your own fans that what happened at the beginning of the year was bad, but it was an aberration. It was a fluke. It's not who we really are. And I think that's the message they've got to send to your fan base for the last couple months of the season.
We're talking to Elliotte Friedman, 32 Thoughts, the podcast, Hockey Night in Canada. And Elliotte, I'm watching the Predators morning skate right now. One thing leading into the game tonight, I was really impressed. It was the first time I had seen Macklin Celebrini in person. Yeah. And, man, he looks like the real deal. And obviously San Jose is super young. They're building around him and 4 or 5 other guys that they think will blossom. But Celebrini, I'm hearing a lot of people say that they think Celebrini's ceiling might be higher than Connor Bedard's. Do you agree?
Yeah, I have heard people say that to me. Yes, I have. They think, I've had definitely people say they think that Celebrini's a better skater than Bedard, and that can help it. Celebrini is a pretty amazing story if you think about it. His father was the director of sports science for a while for the Vancouver Canucks, and eventually was the director of sports or the vice president of sports science for the Golden State Warriors. So he's growing up in really professional environments. He really understands what it takes to be successful as an athlete. There was a great story about him. He used to play in the USHL for the Chicago Steel. And one night the Golden State Warriors were in Chicago because they were going to play the Bulls the next day. And Steve Kerr told the staff and players that his son was a really good player and was going to be a high pick in the draft. So the coaching staff and Draymond Green went to go watch him play, and they were terrible that night. They lost 10-4 or something like that. So they left early. And when he found out they left early, Celebrini say, I have to stay at their games when they play badly. Why couldn't they stay at mine? It was a pretty funny story. I got a good laugh out of it. But that kid understands what it's like to be around pros and what it takes. And, while I think a lot of people are down on Bedard for a little bit of, and I think it's too early for that, I see the ability in Celebrini, and I see why people really like him.
Elliotte, we had an interesting challenge the other night, and it's the first time we had seen one. The Predators challenged successfully a puck that went over the glass. It was originally ruled as a delay of game. The score was 5-5 at the time. Nashville had made the comeback, tied it up, and they're risking going down 5-on-3 if they're not right. And they successfully got it right. But one thing that came up, I thought it was interesting, is the different buildings have different cameras. It's one that's really hard to see, and maybe a game that's on in the playoffs or national TV, it might be easier to see. But that's something that's maybe an inequity in the different buildings, different nights. But obviously, that was a huge call that they got right. I understand it hasn't really been challenged very often since they put that rule in.
Yeah, I think that has been an issue in some buildings. I know they've worked hard to standardize it, but there are some ways that some of these buildings are constructed that can be a little bit different. I know also too, like when we go into buildings sometimes, like depending on, like this is a little bit of inside baseball, but, also too, like you have to set up your cameras in certain ways. Not every building is the same. Sometimes it also depends on which TV network has first right of refusal in the building, depending on if you're in the United States or Canada or in Quebec. So yes, there are some inequities, but I think it's less of an issue than it used to be. But that does happen, Willie. Yes.
Fortunately, they got a good look at it. Elliot, another guy I think Predator fans would be interested to focus on tonight is Mikael Granlund, who played a great game the other night, had 2 goals against his former team. He was such an important player for the Predators on the John Hines teams. He's on that same contract that's expiring. I had somebody that was really has a good eye for how to build a team. He made this point about the Sharks. Granlund would be a very attractive trade piece, I would think, as a center who could do a lot of different things. But he said if he were the Sharks, he would look at really trying to sign him because you need the support for guys like Celebrini and guys like that. What do you think his trade market's like? What are the Sharks thinking there?
I think the Sharks have discussed an extension with him. As always, it's the sweet spot, right? Like, what does everybody want? And so I always think that, but I know I know teams have kind of been around. Right now, I think it's kind of in a bit of it might be a bit early, but I know they've discussed an extension with him. I did try to ask around. Some people were being really quiet about it because I think they were legitimately talking to him. So I think my answer would say right now is I'd probably say I don't know exactly which way this is going to go. He's definitely being scouted. There's no question about that because he can score, he can create offense. But there definitely seemed to be a will on his part to stay. He's bounced around a bit. Some guys don't like that anymore, Willie. I think some guys like to know where they're going to be, and I had heard he wasn't against the idea of staying there.
One last one. I know you've been covering the drama for the JT Miller situation in Vancouver, and I'm sure you're probably tired of talking about it. But I think from Nashville's perspective, if there is a miracle run, or really if you're any of these teams trying to grab that last wild card, because it really does look like there's only one spot. Fair to say, Elliot, in the West, it looks like there are probably 7 spots that are spoken for. That last wild card is up for grabs. You got the Flames, you've got Vancouver, and Vancouver really shouldn't be where they are. You could argue the Predators shouldn't be where they are. But the Miller trade thing is a big, big part of the plot going forward. So do you think it's almost inevitable now that they will move him?
I think they will at some point, but one of the things that I always say, Willie, is that when you're drowning, the other GMs, they don't throw you life preservers, they throw you anvils. And that happens now. Like, teams see that Vancouver wants to make the trade, and they're making it hard for them. The offers are not great. They're asking now, some teams are trying to see if Vancouver will retain salary. Like, that contract's got 5 more years on it. So, people challenge you. They test you. Like, they're trying to test, like, how much does Vancouver think they need to do this right now? How much desperation is there to do that? And Vancouver is waiting through. Like, I think this has been a frustrating season there. It's been a lot more high maintenance than they wanted it or hoped it would be. And I think while they would like to make a move, I think like every team has a limit. Like I'm not going there. And retention is one of those places that Vancouver is unwilling to go.
Elliot, before we let you go, I do have to ask you quickly about the most important story that came out of Edmonton this week. The nacho platter that landed on the ice. An impressive throw. Landed right side up.
Yes.
That's the first time, by the way, I've ever truly related to a professional athlete when Logan Thompson said he was distracted by a tray of nachos. I get it. I absolutely get it. I just wanted to throw that in there quickly. Elliot Freeman,
I have
go
to
ahead.
say, Adam, you should be thrown out of a building if you ruin a good plate of nachos.
I would
good
agree.
Nachos are not to be trifled with. That's how I feel about this issue.
No, I can't speak to the quality of the nachos in Edmonton, but generally speaking, I do agree with you. No one should ever
look like
waste
they had
nachos.
It didn't look like there were jalapenos or salsa. It looked straight up like nachos and cheese. Nothing else, from what I could tell.
You know what? Like
Not
the
yo
topper
cheese.
would have been. The topper would have been like if I was on the ice. If I would have scored, I would have skated over and eaten one of them. I think an opportunity was missed.
Like Andrew Hammond back in the day with the
That's right, the Hamburglar. Yeah,
Yes,
that was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. I couldn't believe he ate that. Curtis Lazar.
Elliot Freeman, presented by Old National Bank. Elliot, great stuff, my friend. We'll talk next week.
All right, guys. Chat next week.
Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL insider, joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. Willie, I know that you must depart to get prepared for the Predators game tonight. Predators and Sharks Part 2. Puck drop at 9:30, pregame at 8:30, right here on 1025, 1063. The Game. We'll get back into the Titans and your reaction to our interview with Mike Borgonzi, Derek Mason, Willie Donick, Adam Bingen, 1025, 1063. The Game.
All right, let's talk league company. It will be the Sharks and the Predators in the rematch tonight at the Shark Tank. And we'll have all the coverage for you here on 1025 The Game. I can see Max Hurst raring to go in another portion of the Shark Tank, sitting on the opposite side as me, preparing for the game. And of course, League Company is such a big sponsor of our Predator coverage throughout the season. So League Company can keep you warm. Look, I know it's been really, really cold, and eat your heart out. It is in the 60s here in San Jose. I know we've had some frigid temperatures back home. It's going to warm up soon, but it always has you wondering about your furnace and your heating system. If it's not working quite right, or you need an upgrade, or you need some maintenance, call League Company, 615-567-1000 or leaguecompany.com. And always keep that number handy because you never know when you might need them. Also, remember that they're always available for year-round coverage. Think ahead to when the summer months come. Make sure your air conditioning is running efficiently and properly as well. 615-567-1000 or leaguecompany.com. In service since 1944. League Company, a proud sponsor of Nashville Predators hockey.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. By the way, for those of you who may not have been sure of what I was referring to at the end of our discussion with Elliot Friedman, the other day, the Oilers played the Capitals in Edmonton. And at one point in the game, someone threw a tray of nachos on the ice. Now, Corey Perry, which Predators fans, they love Corey Perry. Corey Perry was able to evade the nacho platter and score on the play. The Capitals were puzzled by the fact that the play wasn't blown dead because of debris on the ice. But the play continued. Corey Perry scored the goal. And that's all she wrote. But I agree with Elliot Freeman. Derek, you can't throw away a good plate of nachos. You just can't do it.
Nacho cheese.
Yeah, you were cracking yourself up, by the way, during that whole thing.
Yeah, it's just wonder. I guess that's just like that dad joke. Like,
It did lead to, by the way, that play did lead to an all-time highlight caption. Corey Perry avoids nacho platter to blast one-timer goal.
which I thought, maybe. Hey, listen,
You've
it
never
doesn't
been
matter.
decked with something on the field? Someone throw on the
Well,
field?
no, they did. I remember in the Liberty Bowl. I mean, not the Liberty Bowl, Independence Bowl in college. We were playing LSU, and Eddie Kennison had just returned a kickoff for 80-something yards. And then the very next ensuing kickoff, I returned it for 100 yards. But as I'm catching the football,
Ho-hum, I just returned it for 100 yards.
Somebody threw a football. Yeah, I got to get my one up. Come on now. Somebody threw a football on the field as I'm catching the punt. I mean, as I'm catching the kickoff.
Did it hit you?
No, it didn't hit, but it landed right like next to me and close, on the football field. It landed a couple yards from me. And I ended up catching the ball, and maybe that distracted, LSU. I don't know. I doubt it. I was just too fast.
Hey, man, you got to take advantage of every
So I took
loophole you
advantage
can
of it.
find.
Humble
They
brag.
They probably saw fumble. And they
I've
went
never
after the
met
ball.
anybody in my life, because I don't know many professional athletes, but I've never met anybody in my life that can just work in. Oh, yeah, and I returned the kickoff for 100 yards in the middle of a
No
conversation.
big deal. Just 100 yards. Like that guy, it was something.
Hey, listen,
I could have done 105, but the field isn't that long.
It's
so.
not brag. It's just, making sure people put some respect on your name when they talk
Some
about you, man.
respect.
Put some
I
respect on
hear
it,
you.
Yeah, it was in
Nobody
I
here-
returned it, honey.
Nobody
Yeah, I
here
did that.
disrespects Derek Mason.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Put some respect on it. All right?
I hear you, man. So before we talk to
Birdman,
Elliot
respect.
Freeman, before we talk to Elliot Freeman,
Yes.
we talked to Mike Borgonzi, new Titans GM. One texter said that if being a GM doesn't work, he should go into politics. I don't think he answered one question directly. Now, we are spoiled every week on this program. Well, not on this program, on this station, by having Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz is an anomaly, I would say, when it comes to general managers. He tells us things that most GMs wouldn't tell us. His predecessor, David Poyle, was readily accessible, but he did not go into the depth that Barry Trotz does. So I understand, especially since he's new on the job, Mike Borgonzi is going to be a little political in that sense, that he is, he's going to answer the questions the way that he wants to answer them. As you said, Derek, I certainly don't think anybody can accuse us of not asking most of the questions that people wanted to hear. One texter said that we made a big deal about proof of concept yet didn't ask him a question about that. Well, he was asked about that yesterday. And, with the limited time we had, we wanted to make sure we get all of the questions in. I'm hopeful that this is not the last time we will speak to Mike Borgonzi on this show or on this station. One question that we didn't ask, because we were coming up close to time, was I would have been curious about his plans, in terms of being more accessible to fans. Will you be doing regular interviews or regular news conferences? How important is that to you and to the organization that you take on a role like that? I would have loved to have heard that, just because, as we know, his predecessor, Rand Carthon, did not do that as much. Now, we've also heard from Teron Davenport that maybe some of that wasn't up to Rand. But Rand Carthon did not regularly address reporters. He did not come on our station. So I'm hopeful that he will. He seems like quite the affable guy. But you did, Derek, ask him a couple of questions that I thought were interesting about L'Jarius Sneed. Of course, Borgonzi was part of Kansas City when
Mhm.
the Chiefs and the Titans made that trade last year. And Paul Kaharski wrote after that trade that Borgonzi and Brinker were the point people on that trade
Mhm.
because of their long-standing relationship, which we now know led to Borgonzi getting this job. So I did think it was interesting that you asked him about that. What did you make of his response to those questions?
I think I sort of got the response that I expected. You know, if they did have any concerns, and that was one of the reasons, did I really expect him to say, yeah, we were concerned not only about retaining him as he's getting older, because my thing is when you have good people, when you have great players like such as a L'Jarius Sneed, he was great. He was an all-pro, at that position with Kansas City. You try your best to re-sign those guys. And for you, and I understand the way he explained it the way a GM would, minus, the injury. But when you have a guy like that, I just can't see you not wanting to truly sign him back if indeed you don't see no problem with his health, because he's a young guy. And you can never have enough good dominant players. Now, listen, it's worked out for Kansas City now and not for the Tennessee Titans. So if he was still on Kansas City, maybe he would have saw it a little bit different. But now that he's the GM for the Titans, I just wanted to know, was that a factor? Now, I asked the question and he gave me the answer. I'm not going to sit here and try to accuse him of lying or anything else. I got the answer that I was expecting. Let's just say that. I got the answer that I was expecting, and I have no problem with that. Because I don't know any GM worth anything that will come and say, well, yeah, we were worried about the needs. That's why we traded him.
Right.
And you got the job now.
Right.
Yeah,
I
so-
think
But he did address it in the
Yeah.
way that he saw fit.
right. And look, if there are issues with L'Jarius
We'll know pretty
Sneed, knee
soon.
or quad or whatever,
Mhm.
it's his problem again.
Exactly.
It wasn't his problem for a season. Now it's his problem again. But, I can't imagine, they were working on that deal and Borgonzi said to Andy Reid and Brett Veach, can you get a load of Brinker? He thinks that L'Jarius Sneed's fully healthy. I can't believe this guy. And then turn around and obviously take the job a year later. But I did think that was interesting. One of the questions I asked was I wanted to get to the point about the whole final say thing, because we've talked a lot about this, not just in this situation, but we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. And, the question I asked were, how are disagreements resolved and whose opinion matters most in those situations? He did not directly answer the question. He said, every pick we make, every decision we make, we are in agreement. But I have to imagine, and perhaps in hindsight, I could have pressed him more on this. I have to imagine there have been instances where they could not come to an agreement and somebody did have to step in. And I know that Chad Brinker has talked about how he has final authority, but he's hopeful that he'll never have to exercise it. I believe he said something to that effect. But I have to imagine there will come a time when that happens. And I would really love to know what the situation is, because if Mike Borgonzi is in charge of the free agency process, he is in charge of the draft board and all of those things. I'm really curious what happens in those situations. Now, will we ever know? I don't know. I was hoping he would shed a little bit more light into that situation.
But again, I'm sure, I would have liked, a definitive answer, but he's not going to tie himself down. I'm sure, because when things are structured, whatever way they have them structured, ultimately you have to have okay, there has to be a plan. If this doesn't work, then okay, I got final say. You can't say, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We all think no, as much as a group works together and a team works together, it will ultimately be a moment where somebody has to make the decision, just like in a marriage. I don't know how people's marriage are constructed, and that's not my business, but there comes a point where the husband and wife are working together. and we discuss things, but every time we're not on the same page. So somebody has to make a decision, whether you're agreeing with him or you're agreeing with her. Somebody has to say, yes, you're right, we should do that, or no, I'm right, let's do this. Somebody has, even no matter how much y'all collaborate, because relationships and weddings, I mean, marriages, more than likely they are that way until they're not. But there ultimately has to be a decision maker on some situation. You can't say and nobody made it, like both of us. Well, I know both of y'all made the decision, but who said, okay, let's do it we're doing it this way? Who is that person? And he never really gave a definitive. And again, I get it. I understand it, So that was interesting. And I'm not going to hold that against him. I'm not going to sit here and litigate that over and over and over again. Yes, we will talk about it, but I get why he did it. The other interesting thing was when I asked him about, Callahan patience versus drafting a quarterback, in the first round. And if he does show he can play right away, there still will be growing pains. You talked about you want to see progress and you want to see it immediately, and there's accountability that needs to be held when it comes to the head coach. I understand all that, but I understand too that if you do indeed play this young quarterback, there's going to be more times than not, you're not going to have a good season. He may looks promising, but what if you don't have a good season? So how does that look in regards to Brian Callahan, and you showing patience in him as well as the quarterback, because one thing that derails a quarterback is what? The switching of offensive coordinators every other year. We talk about it all the time with quarterbacks that don't succeed, that are drafted. Well, he had 3 or 4 offensive coordinators. We said the thing about Will Levis to an extent. He's had several different coordinators and in so many years. That doesn't help a quarterback develop. What helps a quarterback develop is if you have a good system and you let him stay in that system, even if he's having growing pains in that system. Let him work through it as well as the coach that is coaching him.
615-737-1025. Before we go, you're going to hear a lot of things that the Titans should do with the number 1 pick, who they should take, should they trade down. Then I heard something just now that I just want to hear Derek's reaction to it. We'll do that next. Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
have the solution.
Okay.
If I were the Titans, I would call the Jacksonville Jaguars and try to trade for Trevor Lawrence. And if I was Trevor Lawrence, I would want the absolute heck out of Jacksonville.
I don't have no problem with that.
I would want the absolute heck out of the mess that is the
My
Jacksonville
challenge to
Jaguars
you, though,
right now.
Dan, here's my problem with that, Dan. Be reasonable. I'm going to trade my quarterback within the division.
If you're Jacksonville, first of all, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I am spurring this. Like, if I want out of Jacksonville. And if you're Tennessee, realistically, we're sitting here and we're trying to get all this rebuild, and I would be someone to tell you, I think Tennessee's got a decent football roster, better than the first pick worthy type roster. Shador, and I haven't studied Shador and Cam well enough to make a definitive statement on where exactly I think they might be or whatnot. And Travis Hunter special, you don't matter in that conference unless you get a quarterback. As special as Travis Hunter is,
You don't matter in
you
the
don't
sport.
matter.
You don't matter in the sport. if
So,
you don't-
and you got to rebuild Trevor Lawrence's mindset and his psyche and his confidence. But if I'm Tennessee and I'm looking at it all, I'm calling Jacksonville and saying, okay, because you don't know what's going on in Jacksonville. It's a mess right now.
That was Dan Orlovsky today on First Take arguing that the Titans should trade for Trevor Lawrence, swap the number 1 pick for the previous number 1 pick. Of course, Trevor Lawrence was a number 1 pick. Derek, you did not know that was coming. I wanted to surprise you.
Yeah.
I wanted to take a moment to just get your reaction to Dan Orlovsky suggesting that Trevor Lawrence should find his way out of Jacksonville and the Titans should trade the number 1 pick for Trevor Lawrence.
See, when you talk for a long time, and I do, I'm
You talk for a long time.
Yeah,
too.
I'm guilty of this too. So I'm throwing myself in there. There's going to be some times where you just say something just totally outrageous, and could that possibly? Is that out of the realm of possibility so far? Could it possibly happen? Can they ask for it? Absolutely. All that stuff can, in theory, yeah. But in reality, no, it's not going to happen. No matter how much Trevor Lawrence may think it's a dumpster fire with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it seems to be that way. They are not going to trade a franchise quarterback who just needs the right coach. They've gotten the GM out of the way. They just need the right coach and GM together. He'll be all right. You think that they are going to trade them to somebody within the division? And there's no quarterback in this year's draft that people consider transcendent or generational. They don't even know if a quarterback's going to be pick number 1. And you're expecting me to think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to trade their quarterback, who they just paid a lot of money to. And it's really not his fault. It's the organization. Y'all need to get y'all stuff together. And it seems like they are now doing it. It may be a little bit too late because the guy that they probably wanted, Ben Johnson, he said, no. Balky's the GM. I'm not coming there. I'm going over here. And there he went. But to think that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to trade to listen, I would be all for it. Hey, give me Trevor Lawrence. I'll take him. But do you think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to trade Trevor Lawrence to the Titans? If indeed that does happen, the Titans will have to give up a haul. And when I mean a haul. And then on the side note, this is what happens when you're a national guy. And I like Dan Orlovsky. He does a good job. I'm not saying that. But this is what happens when you're a national guy and you try to cover a local team that you really never talk about. For you to say they have a good roster, what you smoking, boy? What you smoking?
A better roster.
What you smoking?
He's saying it's a better roster than,
no, they're not.
In the draft.
No, what did Bill Parcells say? You are what your record says you are. And that's being naive. He's being naive. He doesn't know. That's all. He really doesn't know. Because this roster is not a good roster. Hence, 3-14. The new GM just said it. Hey, it's not a good roster. Our record indicates who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Orlovsky. Just go back and watch the Titans
I wouldn't suggest
all
that.
17 games.
I
and
had
you
to
will
do
see.
that. It wasn't great.
And you will see this is not a good roster, young man.
I just wanted
and I
to,
can say young man because he's younger than me.
I just wanted to get Derek's blood boiling before the end of the program. That'll do it for us today. Predators and Sharks tonight. Puck drop at 9:30. Pregame at 8:30 right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company coming up next.
Be love on your people. Have a blessed, wonderful, and safe. Protect your people, everyone. Be blessed. Have a wonderful day. Peace.